All right, Mr. Lamb, you can call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will call Dr. Anthony Clark. Y'all switch sides. I'll be please.
Clark, before you sit down, if you would face Mr. Lamb and receive the oath, please.
And just number them for me in that order right there. Would you raise your right hand, please? You swear that the testimony you will give in this case will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you tell the jury your name, please?
Dr. Anthony J. Clark.
And where are you employed, Dr. Clark?
I'm currently employed by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Division of Forensic Science as an associate medical examiner located in the Central Regional Medical Examiner's Office in Macon, Georgia.
And how long have you been employed by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation?
About 2.5 years.
Where were you employed prior to that?
I was employed as the District 2 Medical Examiner's Office in Tallahassee, Florida. I was an employee of KWB Pathology Associates. I worked for them from 2007 to 2023.
Okay. Do you have other work experience in your field?
Yes, prior to that, I worked for 13 years as a GBI Associate Medical Examiner located in the Southwestern Regional Crime Office, Medical Examiner's Office in Moultrie, Georgia.
So you were in the GBI Medical Examiner's Office and for 13 years, then you were in Florida, and now you're back in Georgia.
That's correct.
Okay. What is your educational background from college forward, please?
I obtained my Bachelor of Science degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I then did 2 years of animal research at MIT, then was accepted to the Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia. I graduated from the college and did a 2-year general surgical internship at New Britain General Hospital in New Britain, Connecticut. I then transferred to the Hartford Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut and did 4 years of anatomic and clinical pathology. I then traveled down to Atlanta, Georgia, where I did 2 years forensic pathology fellowship at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office in association with Emory University. I am board certified in anatomic and forensic pathology. I have medical licensures both in Georgia and Florida. That's when I got my first job with the GBI, was in the Moultrie Medical Examiner's Office.
What is the fields of anatomic pathology and forensic pathology? Do those, I mean, I know obviously there's some overlap, but are they different too in some ways?
Pathology is the study of disease or trauma and its effects on the human body. As an anatomic pathologist, you usually work in a hospital setting. You look at tissue biopsies, you're under the microscope, you look at cancers, you look at inflammation, you make the diagnosis to help the clinical people understand what the process is. As a forensic pathologist, I deal with what's called an autopsy. I examine the dead individual and determine the cause and manner of death.
And in that sense, do you have specialized training in determining not only the manner, the nature of the death, but actually the causes of the injuries or illnesses or conditions that result in death?
That's correct.
Are there specialized is there specialized literature or research in your field that relates to how different types of events might, the types of trauma that might result from different types of events, like in like for instance, falls, car crashes, jumps off of buildings or whatever. I mean, the different types of events that can cause trauma. Are you trained to recognize the features and the commonalities of different types of trauma as it relates to the trauma that results in death?
Yes, sir. That's what we do as forensic pathologists. We see patterns in the type of trauma that's occurred to an individual, whether that trauma comes from external forces or even from natural disease. We're still some of the last generalists out there, and there is we do have literature out there.
Have you ever testified as an expert in the field of forensic pathology in the courts in the state of Georgia?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Do you know approximately how many times you've testified as an expert in Georgia courts?
It's been several hundred times across.
Several hundred?
Yes.
Okay. Have you also been qualified as an expert in the field of forensic pathology by courts in other states besides Georgia?
Yes.
Have you testified in other places and locations?
Yes.
Do you know how many times or around how many times you may have testified elsewhere?
Again, several hundred.
How many autopsies have you performed in your career?
It's over 8,100.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would tender Dr. Clark as an expert in not only in medicine, but more specifically in the fields of anatomic and forensic pathology.
You wish to report the witness, Mr. Green?
No, Your Honor, we have no objection.
All right. The witness will be allowed to give opinion testimony in his areas of expertise.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. As a forensic pathology, where does your work primarily take place?
We receive a death call. We have investigators that receive the death call and get the information regarding the death, determinations whether to bring the body in or not, and then the body is shipped to the Macon morgue, Central Regional Medical Examiner's Office morgue. And
then once the body is there, is that the location where you perform autopsies?
That's correct.
What do you do as a general rule? I mean, before we get specifically into the details of this case, what do you do generally in terms of identifying, in terms of performing an autopsy? What's the process?
The process, yes, sir. Again, the body is brought in. Generally, it's in a body bag. Whether it's sealed or not, that's up to the coroner. If the body is the possibility of being gunshot wounds or some kind of retained fragments from an instrument or a car accident, we usually do what's called a low doc scan, which is an entire body scan to identify any foreign bodies or bullets that may be still in the body, identify any broken bones. In all infant cases, part of our process is to scan them also, so they get entire body scans too. What we're looking for is not only new fractures or injury, evidence of skeletal injury, but even maybe healing stuff that's going on too, to help direct us in the examination. We take pictures of the outside of the bag, and then as soon as we start opening the bag, we start taking photographs, how the individual arrives. Do they have medical devices? Do they have clothing, jewelry? Is there any obvious signs of trauma to the body? Any damage to the clothing? Any patterns on the clothing, like somebody's hit by a car? Is there any parts of that vehicle on the body that we have to collect as evidence? We start removing these things, documenting as we go along, the clothing, et cetera. We'll clean the bodies up. We get height, weight. We do general description of what the individual looked like, their weight, their height, eye color, et cetera. We'll identify, again, any signs of injury. We'll try to identify any patterns of injury. We take measurements as needed, both on front surface and the back surface. And then we start doing what's called the internal examination, where we open up the head, neck, chest, and abdomen, and try to correspond that did the outside trauma cause internal trauma cause damage to the organs that could result in a death, or if there's no trauma on the external examination, what natural disease process might have caused this individual's death. We see a lot of our cases are natural deaths or drug overdoses, so we may have to do other stuff. We do collect tissues, usually blood, urine, and the fluid from the eye for toxicology. We'll do some other studies with the microscope if necessary, take a little snippets of the tissues to look under the microscope. If there's no obvious cause of death, there may be an infection going on, there may be a tumor that pops up, and we may want to identify what that tumor is. We do take DNA stuff. On infants, we do a little bit more workup. We do a respiratory viral panel to look for any kind of infectious process that may be infecting the lungs. We'll do blood cultures generally. We'll look at the electrolytes and the vitreous humor, determine whether it's just maybe this child has insulin-dependent diabetes, is the sugar real high. We'll look at those kind of things. And all this stuff is collected and usually sent off to another lab for analysis, and then I get the results back.
Did you perform an autopsy in January of 2024, the body of a child by the name of Romeo Angeles?
Yes, I did.
When was that done?
We performed the autopsy on Wednesday, January 17th, 2024, and we started at 8:30 a.m.
When you began your external examination, but before we, what did you initially observe with result? Sorry, got my tongue twisted there. When you performed the external examination, what did you generally observe with respect to the size and development and condition of the decedent's body as a whole?
The decedent appeared to be compatible with a reported age of 18 months. Our measurements and weights were consistent with that. There were medical devices on the child, which we documented. Sometimes the medical devices can cause injury to the body, which I documented in the autopsy report. We also started noticing some injuries to the facial area and head area.
When you observed the body as a whole, did you form any opinion or conclusions as to the absent the trauma? Okay, let's set the issues of trauma aside for the moment. Did you form any conclusions as to the child's general development, nourishment, hydration, those sorts of things?
Yes, sir. Everything seemed to be within normal limits.
I'm sorry?
Everything seemed to be within normal limits.
Okay. Did you express the conclusion in your report that that he was well nourished, well developed, and well hydrated?
Yes.
His height and weight, I think you said, were in the normal range for a child of that age. Can you tell the jury, if you recall, or if you have your report? You do have your report in front of
yes,
you, right? Can you tell the jury what his height and weight were?
He measured at what we call it the crown heel measurement. It's 78.7 centimeters. That put him between the 10th and 25th percentiles. His weight was 11.6 kilograms. That put him between the 50th and 75th percentiles.
Is my math correct when I say that correlates to approximately 31 inches tall and approximately 25 and a half pounds?
I'm not as good as a math as I used to be. I'll take your word for it, yes, sir.
Okay. So, with regard to the examination of the body, beginning, I guess, with the head, the face, did you identify any areas that were reflective of injury to this child?
Yes, sir.
That were suggestive of injury?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell, in general, and I have some photographs, Your Honor, the photographs that I'm using from Dr. Clark's work, I am not going to display on these monitors. I have them slightly larger than normal size, but than photo size. But I would ask that he be allowed to, once we get to that point, that he be allowed to step down here so I can hold those up and he can point to them and so forth for the jury.
All right, you shared them with Mr. Gamble?
They are all, I have not, he hasn't gone over these particular exhibits, but all of the photographs have been previously shared with him.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. We probably better if we just do it now.
So there's some
a
issues
matter
that we need to
take
do?
up with
All right.
you.
Yes, we probably need to do this outside the presence of the jury.
All right, I'm going to ask the jury to step into the jury room. I do not believe it will be long.
I do think it is, I think for the witness to remain in here for this matter.
If he's going to move up there, she needs a microphone up there.
Oh, okay.
Put that in front of you. Like you can put it on that stand right there.
Right here?
Yeah, like on the
Even if
top.
he's turned this way, talking to him.
Okay, or put it over there.
Put it on
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that'll be good.
Well, how about in the chair? Can it be in the chair? The booth right there.
Right there.
Okay,
Right there.
okay, sure.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead and identify the exhibits.
Yes, that's what I was about to do.
It looks like what we're dealing with are autopsy photos, is that correct?
Some are, some, yes, all are autopsy, and some are not. Nothing's been done to the child, and some are after there's been some type of procedure done to the child.
And those are the two that you,
Well, there's 4 of them in
There's
there that
4?
I at least want to
Okay.
address with the court about.
all right.
I think Lewis
I
knows.
think I probably know which four they are before
I suspect you.
you even address the issue.
Yes.
All right, so let's identify them for the record.
Yes, sir. And I'm not.
And also, be careful not to show them to the jury, because you know, they're big, and they were facing the jury when you moved them to behind your stand, so be careful about that. Face them maybe the other way until they're tender.
Well,
I mean, I would try to make sure which one was on the front so that it wouldn't be something that would be shocking to anybody sitting there.
Okay, but I mean, generally, I don't like any exhibit to be shown to the jury until
That's why.
well, if you took all of them leaning this way and the last one turned it where the picture faced that way,
Yeah, I
it'd be
mean,
white on each side.
there's ways to do it
You know,
without them seeing
I
it.
think that would probably
I'll
solve
lay
it.
them face down right here.
Okay.
However you want to.
Okay,
Okay, so.
so what are the numbers that we're discussing?
The exhibits, Your Honor, that I expect to tender are
And for the record,
in the order that I.
the forensic pathologist is in here, Dr. Clark is in the court.
Yes, sir, because I think that there's information that he can share with regard to these images that will explain why they need to be introduced.
All right, identify the
Okay.
numbers.
All right, I'm about to. State's Exhibit 33,
Okay,
which is a post-incision photograph of the liver area. State's Exhibit 32, which is a post-incision photograph of the left side of the head, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. State's Exhibit 36, which is a post-incision view, I think, of the right side of the head.
That's
Is that
correct.
And State's Exhibit 29, which is a post-incision view of the back of the child's head.
okay. Is that what you,
That shows what I think will be referred to as a catastrophic injury in
okay. So,
the
Mr.
context
Gamble,
of
what
this.
is your objection to the photographs?
My objection to photographs, Your Honor, is these are autopsy photos in which the child's appearance as he originally appeared has been altered because of the fact that the autopsy is being done. Of course, I realize that would have to occur, but it is not necessary to introduce those into evidence and show them to a jury in order for them to be able to describe the injury or to tell what happened. And these photographs are highly inflammatory, in which they would serve the most purpose would simply be to prey upon the emotions of the jury to try to show this disfigured child now where he's been autopsied. And in most cases, the courts have ruled it's not favored to do that. There are times when, yes, that's the only way something could be shown. But in this particular case, there's no reason why the medical examiner cannot testify as to showing what injuries he observed from the outside, and then that he did indeed make incisions, and he determined that if there was a brain bleed or whatever it may be. But it's not necessary to show a photograph of that graphic nature. It adds very little in terms of relevant information that they don't have available to them, but it has a highly inflammatory side to it on the other side that is driving toward the emotion that is prejudicial entirely toward the defendant, and it would be inappropriate. And it also could lead to confusion, because oftentimes, no matter what you tell a jury and explain why they're sitting there showing these photographs, they may think that these things are injuries that came into the examiner's office. I know that if you allowed it, you would probably tell him he needs to explain that, but it's still easy for a jury not to understand that and go back and think, oh my
I know there are
goodness.
cases on this. What did the cases say? Because I know some are allowed, some are not, or there's some circumstances. So what?
In a general sense, the way I understand it, Your Honor, if it is not necessary in order to explain the prognosis or diagnosis, then it would not be allowed, because if it had inflammatory abilities to inflame the jury into passion and would be prejudicial against the defendant. But now, if it's necessary, as in there are times where the only way you can explain something might be to show what is internal, you would have to. Now, it's discretion of the court. I believe it's a discretionary decision.
Okay.
But in my opinion, what I have read on those issues, for the most part, it has gone towards the favor of not allowing them unless there's some really overriding reason that they need to be there, and you cannot explain it to a jury in any other reasonable manner. They're not going to put just a total blockade to you where you can't prove your case.
All right.
But they do say not to do that.
All right, Mr. Lamb. Tell me with regard to each one what it is you're trying to identify. And of course, if there's case law on a standard or anything of that nature, I'd
Yes, sir.
certainly like to hear it.
The analysis, the proper analysis for the court is to consider the evidence or the proffered evidence in light of Rule 403, which requires or which states that, of course, evidence which is particularly prejudicial or inflammatory, et cetera, can be excluded if those features outweigh the probative value of the evidence, and that's the analysis that the court should undertake. In Albury v. State, that's Albury v. State, 314 Georgia 459. That's a 2022 case. The Georgia Supreme Court considered the issue of the 403 analysis of post-incision autopsy photographs. In fact, in this case, there was a post-incision photograph of the decedent's head after the skin of the scalp and face had been peeled back. And although that photograph did not depict the fatal injury per se, the court said that it was allowed because it would assist the jury's understanding of the circumstances surrounding the decedent's death, and that simply requiring the medical examiner to testify without being able to demonstrate to the jury the nature and extent of the injury was not inappropriate. I mean, to allow him to explain it for those purposes. The photographs of ultimately what the court concluded was, even if the Supreme Court concluded that even if the photograph is considered gory or gruesome or whatever other term you want to use to describe it, that if it has a meaningful probative value and that the probative value is not outweighed by the risk of unfair prejudice or misleading the jury or cumulative evidence, etc., then it should be and can be admitted. In this case, the 4 photographs that...
You want to go through them and tell me what it is and
Yes,
let's
sir.
see them.
Yes, sir. The 4 photographs that are in issue, State's Exhibit 33 is a photograph of the liver, the area around the liver, which is here, okay, which shows not only the extent of it shows the extent of the laceration of the liver, but it also shows the substantial collection of blood below or in the area around the liver. At least that's what I believe it shows. And I expect that Dr. Clark would testify along those lines. And Dr. Clark, I would ask you that if I
So there's a scale on here that tells you how big it is.
Yes, sir. That's right. It shows shows it, I guess, in terms of the size of the injury, etc. And I would ask Dr. Clark if
I think you can just make a proffer. In
Okay.
fact, Dr. Clark, if you need to take a break, you can. I don't think I'm gonna need your testimony until you're back.
I mean, I simply was going to have him. What I intended, what I think he would testify to is that what the photographs show is it enables him to better display for the jury and help the jury understand the nature and the extent of the injuries that the child suffered. So there's one from the abdomen, which is the one that I just referred to. State's Exhibits 32 and 36 show the skull with the scalp peeled back on different sides. Okay, one side, one's left side, one's right side. Okay.
The same injury?
No, sir, not same injury, different injuries, which is the significance of it. It shows that there are multiple injuries to the skull and to the brain, and those injuries are not limited. Those injuries are not limited to simply, bruising or something of that effect. I mean, those injuries, they show hematomas and hemorrhages, brain hemorrhages occurring in different locations. And the significance of it is I think that he will testify that each of these injuries represents a different impact that the child suffered.
I do think the doctor needs to step outside because we're talking about what he's going to testify to.
Okay.
And if you'll just step out while we're finished.
I'm sorry. I mean, the reason I asked you to stay in here was because I thought that you might need.
Well, I know, but right now, I
testimony.
think while you
So,
proffer, if there's some question about whether he would, then we'll bring him back in and let him testify
Understood.
to it. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so those are the 2 of the skull.
Right, of the left and right side of the skull.
All right, and what is this?
29 is, I will accept it is the most gruesome of the photographs, but it is the most essential of the photographs. It shows the massive injury to the back of the child's head, this being the scalp, and this being the skull, and the collection of blood. The fracture is in here that shows the collection of blood, how extensive the hematoma was, and the hemorrhage that came from this injury to the back of the skull.
Is this from the outside of the skull?
This is the outside of the skull.
Okay.
This is the inside of the scalp,
Okay.
where it's been peeled down.
So is that of the same injuries that are in the other 2?
No, sir. This is the injury at the back of the head. The others are showing injuries on the sides and on the top of the head.
All right.
There's only one photograph of each
Okay.
injury in question. And I will, in terms of the state's effort to limit the amount of this type of testimony or this type of evidence, I will let the court know that when I met with Dr. Clark, that he had identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. He had identified 19 different post-incision photographs that he thought would reflected what his testimony would be, or would be used to reflect his testimony. And I went through those and scaled it down to what I think is a very small amount. I will acknowledge that I am somewhat uncomfortable with presenting these images to a jury, and there is no question about that. I don't typically do it. I think it's been 5 years since I used post-incision photographs in a trial.
Do you have them in regular size?
I have them on my computer in regular size, but
Printed.
no, sir, I don't. I didn't have them printed in regular size because I wanted him to be able to, wanted him to be able to stand here so it could, so the folks on the jury could see what he was pointing to as he was explaining his testimony.
All right. So, Mr. Gamble, under 403, what would be your argument? I mean, I can see where they have probative value.
I see that, this balance and test of the probative value versus the harm and prejudice of, inflammatory nature of the photographs on the other side. And if you look at those photographs, like the one that shows the skull where it's been pulled back, it's pretty gruesome looking. And you actually take that, and if you fold it back over, then you would have the regular skull. You would see from the outside, you wouldn't see much of an injury. But in looking at that photograph, it looked like, and I'm not saying it wasn't an injury, of course it was, but it's from an internal view. It looked like a terrible injury that would be clearly visible. And these people are not medically trained. It's not like they say, I see autopsies all the time. Yes, I understand when there's a big shot here of blood pooling in a hole or a small abrasion or whatever it may be. Their viewpoint will most likely be, boy, it looks like that was a much more gravity to that injury than it is from a visual standpoint. And it's one that causes great confusion for them, but it's also very inflammatory. And Dr. Clark can easily testify. If he's going to testify about the liver laceration, he can testify to the size of it, the length of it, the severity of it. He can do all of those without showing it. He can do the same thing with skull fracture. About he thinks it's a large fracture, it's a small fracture, it's a total break, it's not a break, all of those things. But you've now opened up something that looks much more gruesome than it really is necessary to provide to this jury. And it adds very little probative value from the standpoint of proving this case versus how inflammatory it is.
All right.
Last thing I'll say, Your Honor, is that it's part of what Mr. Gamble said is exactly the value of these photographs is that you can describe an injury and say, well, there was an injury to the back of his head, and there was some swelling to the back of his head, and it looked like a hematoma, like there's a lot of there's some blood collected there, and that sort of thing. And simply describing it in that way and describing where the location of the injury and that sort of thing does not portray the significance of the injury and the extent of the injury. And that's part of what this is about, is the injury to the back of the head is an injury of the nature that it would have caused what the other doctors have testified to, in other words, an immediate onset of symptoms and that sort of thing. It is, I think the photographs have significant probative value. I think the state has shown great restraint in choosing only these 4 photographs to offer. And the other thing I will say, just for clarity, is the reason that I had them printed this size was so that because I didn't want to display them on a screen in the courtroom. I wanted to be able, but I did want the jury to be able to see what the doctor is referring to.
Well, I do think they have probative value because they actually show the internal injury, and you can't see that from the internet. I know you could describe it, but my visual observation of it is telling when you see, particularly the ones with the blood and the scalp fractures. So I'm going to allow it. I realize that's a discretionary matter, and I do think that they have some potential to be prejudicial, but I think they do have more probative value, so I'm going to allow them. Do you want me to give the jury any kind of cautionary instruction?
I do, Your Honor. Cautionary instructions that they realize that the purpose of those photographs is to try to show the injury internally, but that because they're an autopsy photograph, that there are certain things that have been done to the body that are not the result of any injury, that was a necessary part of the procedure in order to be able to view where the actual injury is at. Because that's the real, that's not the only issue to me. I think it's prejudicial, period, but it is a secondary issue to me is the confusion that can occur from a jury just looking at the whole picture and thinking, oh, this all happened. Everything I see, the scalp being pulled back, this whole area is from the injury, and it's simply not.
All right. I'll say something to them about that, and also that, you know, they should not let the fact that they're emotionally, you know, I'll think of some wording there, but emotionally, that they should not let that part of it, you know, interfere with
The
their.
graphic nature of the photograph should not be.
Yeah. I'll think of some language on
Yes.
that.
I'll also say, I mean, what my intention is to have him generally describe the injury before the photograph's displayed.
Okay.
Then I'm going to ask him, what will this photograph show them?
Okay.
And then once he tells what it will show them, I will show it and we'll show it briefly, you know,
All right.
just long enough for him to point out the salient features.
All right, well, let's take a quick restroom break and we'll come back in. Make sure that they're not in that restroom over here.
Would it be improper for me to, in the court's view, would it be improper for me to have to briefly confer with Dr. Clark and explain to him, you know, how I want him to testify in terms of the explanations?
I think you can just ask him the questions. He'll
And then, okay,
I don't-
yes, sir. That's what I'll do.
All right.
That's an injury on and about the head. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, on the
And-
external examination.
Okay, and so with regard to the external examination, can you identify, can you tell the jury what injuries you noted to the head?
Okay. To the right forehead area, there were a couple of small bruises, about 3 of them here. To the center of the forehead, there was a crusted abrasion or scrape. Looked like it was starting to heal a little bit, very superficial. On the right side of the head and on the left side of the head were fresher abrasions. They didn't look like much, but you're always suspicious in these kind of cases that they may lead to more. So there's those abrasions or scrapings there too. On the left side of the face, there was some pattern bruising. We call it tram track appearance. It usually associated with a grip or a slap mark where at least 2 of the fingers caused some bruising on the face. There was a bruise underneath the left jaw area here. There was a small bruise to the right side of the eye here. And there was some bruising that was on the back right, behind the right ear, and then what we call the mastoid area. And then later on, when you touched the back of the head, it felt real boggy. I didn't see anything externally, but it just felt swollen, kind of what we call boggy. And later on, I found out there was a hematoma under a collection of blood in the backside of the head.
And with regard to the bruising, do you have an opinion as to what causes bruising?
Well,
Just ask me that way. What causes bruising?
abrasions and bruises of the face are generally, you can see them in a toddler, falling down, hit their head on something, etc. The problem I had was that these bruises, or these abrasions that I'm seeing externally, are on all sides of the head and not really consistent with one fall. Okay, it seems like there was multiple injuries around the side, on the head, on the front side and on the sides and to the back of the head, which was much more significant.
With regard to the injuries for the moment, just sticking to the bruising, were you able to develop an opinion as to whether or not those bruises represented acute injuries of any sort?
Yes, they all look fairly happened at the same time, except for the one that looked like it was healing on the forehead about here.
And what would be the time frame in which those bruises might have been incurred? I mean, what would you expect the time frame to be in which they might have occurred?
Well, taking them in isolation, it could be hours to a day or so. With the injuries that I saw internally, I would think minutes to hours.
So, is it your opinion that those injuries reflect that they're very acute injuries, but that's not based just on the examination of them? It's based on the totality.
Totality
is that
of
right?
the situation, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. There were some photographs that we took that I copied that you took, or somebody took at your direction during the autopsy that demonstrates the bruising to the head and the various locations of the bruises to the head. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And these are all external photographs, Your Honor, and they reflect the things that he just talked about. But I'm going to have him, if I may, have Dr. Clark step over here, and then so he can demonstrate or display to the jury.
If he could kind of come to the side so that Mr. Gamble can see as well.
Okay.
Unless, like if he stands kind of to the front and to the side, that'd be.
Yes, sir. Wherever you want me to put them.
And yeah, just for the record, I renew my objection. I understand the rules, but just for preservation purposes.
And I don't think he's getting to those photographs yet, but your objection is.
Continuing objection, yeah.
And if you need to move around to see better, that'll be fine.
I see okay
All
on
right.
that, yeah.
Okay.
And
All right, you can
I know which
proceed.
way it's gonna be pointing, but.
I'm going to get you to step down.
Okay.
So you can go through each piece. All right. Let me ask you, first is State's Exhibit number 34, and what does State's Exhibit 34 show generally?
State's Exhibit 34 is identification photographs on all the students. We made sure the face is cleaned up. We put a placard in there with the case number, and this is just to identify the person who we're doing the examination on. But also in this photograph, we don't have the little ruler in there that we normally would, but you can see that there are injuries to the right forehead area and to the right eye area.
And so this photograph is sort of an overall photograph of the face from the frontal view. Is that
Right,
correct?
yeah, what we call the identification photograph.
Okay. All right. Your Honor, we tender State's 34.
Any objection?
No, yeah.
All right, submitted without objection.
At this time, Your Honor, I'll display it to the jury and have Dr. Clark tell them what they're
Once it's
seeing.
admitted, it can be displayed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, we have the identifying placard showing where we did the autopsy, the case number, and you can see this is kind of just showing the child, the infant here, his face here. But you start seeing that there's some bruising here, and there's a little bruising here. This distortion here is due to having the endotracheal tube in, and they have that strap to hold it in place, so ignore that. And then you see that there's a little purplish discoloration here, and that's where that grip or slap mark injury was, and we'll see better pictures of it in a minute.
Okay. Right. State's Exhibit. Hang on just a moment. I control my language, which is good. State's Exhibit 30 demonstrates what?
Now, this is a close-up on that right forehand contusions. You see that there's 3, 2 deeper, 1 a little bit lighter. We do have the ruler in this picture here, which is in centimeters, so that if you want to get an idea of the size, you can see how big or small they are. You can also see the injury to the right eye area.
And so this is State's 30, which I'll tender at this time.
Any objection?
No objection, yeah.
All right, submitted without objection. We'll just say, Ms. Lamb, just say, well, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you were saying. She's going to get over so she can hear better.
Yes, sir.
There's a table right there if you wanted to sit right there. And if everybody would speak up, please.
So State's Exhibit 30, which I'm displaying to the jury now, can you point for them and show them the injury which you just described?
Okay, so here's the ruler that I described before, and then you can see the bruising here, here, and here. It doesn't seem like much, but I'm always concerned about any kind of bruising to a child's head. And then you can see the little bruise here to the left, the lateral canthus or the outer part of the eye here.
State's Exhibit 27 shows what? in
This
general
is
terms?
that pattern injury I told you about that's on the left cheek area. You can see that it's about right here in the face, and then also underneath the angle of the jaw on this side, there's a smaller bruise down there.
With tender states 27 that's down
Any
there.
objections, 27?
No objection, Your Honor.
Submitted without objection.
Now, would you point that and tell the jury what you mean by pattern injury or pattern bruise and point out the pattern to them, please, that they're seeing?
Okay, so we have the ruler here, the left eye is here, the left ear is here, so this is the left cheek area. And what we're having here is we got a bruise here, an area of sparing here, and then another bruise here. So what happens in a grip mark or a slap mark type of thing is when the fingers make contact with the skin here and here, the blood actually squeezes between the fingers. So when you pull the hand away, you see a linear bruise here, you see a linear bruise here, and then these areas of sparing are where the fingers are. So you get a sense, I mean, it's not the best example of it, but it struck me as that this area is sparing here. So is this a grip mark or is it a slap mark? We also have a small bruise. Here's the angle of the jaw here, left ear's here. There's another small bruise here, which is an unusual place to have a bruising on a kid from an accidental type of injury.
State's Exhibit 31 shows what, Dr. Clark? Just in general, this is simply for identification purposes at the moment.
Right. This is the abrasions or scraping of the skin on the left side of the head here.
Okay. Tender State's 31 at this time, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Submitted without objection.
Okay. State's Exhibit 31, if you'll show the jury what is significant here.
Okay, so we have our ruler. We have the left ear, just atop the left ear, and you can see there's an area here that's abraded, and there's a little hemorrhage into the tissues, but it's an abrasion there, and actually there's another abrasion right back here. Doesn't show it as well in this picture.
State's Exhibit 35 for general identification shows what?
This is showing a picture below the right ear to the back right side of the neck where we see a large area of bruising.
Tender State's 35.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Submitted without objection.
State's Exhibit 35, which I'm displaying now, Dr. Clark, if you could point to for the jury to what you have testified about and identify it for them.
Okay, here's the ruler again. Here's the right ear. The bottom here is your right earlobe. And you can see this red discoloration here coming here. And once we get inside, you'll see that it actually extends from the back of the head and comes to the right side. So this is all hemorrhage underneath here.
Were there other injuries, bruises, and abrasions and contusions that you identified once you shaved the child's head, or partially shaved the child's head?
Yes, with all these injuries popping up, we were trying to take pictures without having to shave the head, take the pictures of the various injuries. But there were so many popping up, we had to shave the head, partially shave the hair to show these injuries better.
And State's Exhibit 28 simply shows, that is a photograph with the partially shaved head, shows other injuries to the top and side of the head, is that right?
To the top right and to the right side of the head, yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Tender State's 28, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, submitted without objection.
So, in this photograph, Dr. Clark, can you identify for the jury which injuries they're seeing and explain whether it reflects one injury or more than one injury?
Okay, this does reflect more than one injury. The top of the right ear is here. We have an abrasion to the right side of the head here. We have a bruise up here, and we have a larger bruise sitting here.
What is this area here?
That might be from us when we shaved a little bit.
Okay.
We caught the skin a little bit, but they don't have the best technique.
Fair. So, would these injuries, when you say these are separate injuries, how would you have those separate injuries incurred, in general terms? How would you have separate injuries incurred in a limited area, like the top of the head?
Well, I felt like it was multiple impacts.
Multiple impacts, okay. Do each of these bruises on the face and the head, do they represent more than one impact?
Yes, sir.
Does each bruise represent its own separate impact in a sense?
In a sense, yes, sir.
Now, I think we're going to have the rest of your testimony and then come back to the internal injuries that are going to be shown here in just a few moments. Okay. Now, did you identify areas of trauma to the body other than the head?
Yes, I did.
And what part of the body other than the head did you identify injuries? Where did you identify injuries?
So when we started to do the examination, we make a wide incision on the chest and down through the abdomen and reflect the tissues to show the chest shield and then the abdominal cavity. Well, on the chest shield, there was some hemorrhage to the right side ribs here, 6 through 10. And it's to the outside of the ribs here, which is an unusual place for when CPR is done. Sometimes you could break a rib in CPR, but a lot of times it's more frontal than all the way out lateral, and it's maybe sometimes on the back side. So that was kind of an unusual pattern, and usually with bad CPR, you see it on both sides where there's been too much pressure put on the chest because you're pressing on the chest and they'll break symmetrically. So when you see rib fractures in CPR, you see them coming down like here, 3, 4, and 5, okay? Somebody's really pressing hard. In infants, I don't generally see rib injuries. I mean, it's very rare that we see rib injuries. The other thing I noticed was that there was quite a bit of blood in the stomach. And when I looked at the liver, which sits right here, there's 2 major lobes, the right lobe and the left lobe. The right lobe was basically essentially crushed, and it caused bleeding into the abdominal cavity, but also caused bleeding into what we call the retroperitoneal space. There's tissues that line the back of the abdominal cavity, that there's potential space there where organs lie, like the kidneys all lie in the retroperitoneum. So there could be potentially a bleeding into that retroperitoneal space. And this, to me, implied that this injury occurred pre-mortem or before death because the child had to have a blood pressure to be able to push that blood into those tissues. Also push the blood out into the abdominal cavity, what we call hemoperitoneum. The other strange thing was that the right adrenal gland was also torn up. That implied to me a heavy blow to this area, causing the rib injuries, the liver injury, and the adrenal gland injury, which is I'd never see that in CPR or even bad CPR.
When injuries occur, if an injury does occur to the liver as a result of CPR, where on the liver, what part of the liver would you expect that injury to occur?
In the cases that I've seen in children and in adults is, again, right lobe, left lobe. You usually see the tear that's closer to the midline where they come together. You'll see the tear between the 2 lobes. And you'll see a little bit of blood in the abdominal cavity, but you don't see the retroperitoneal hemorrhage.
Now, what kind of force would be necessary to cause a laceration of the liver, like you described?
A car accident would be a very common thing to see.
So the same level of force that you might see from a car accident?
That's correct.
Would be that the amount of force required to cause that much of an injury?
Yes, sir.
What about the injury to the adrenal gland, the laceration of the adrenal gland? What type of force would be necessary to inflict that injury?
The same level.
Would a single blow to the abdomen cause both of those injuries?
It's a possibility, yes, sir.
Now, with regard to blood pooling around the liver, Was there a photograph that? Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm standing here looking and looking for this piece of paper, and I didn't think to look that way. Thank you. Okay. So the blow to the liver, the injury to the liver, and the blood collected around it. Was there a photograph that was taken at the autopsy which shows the extent of that blood and shows generally where the laceration occurred to the liver?
Yes, so there were several pictures actually that we took when we first opened up. We lifted the liver up to show the injury to the liver and the retroperitoneal hemorrhage. We took the liver out. There were other pictures showing the retroperitoneum. I actually sliced the liver to show the extent of the damage to the right lobe of the liver.
State's Exhibit 33, which you've already seen, is that the photograph that shows is that one of the photographs that shows the extent of the injury to the liver and the extent of blood collected around the liver?
It shows the liver injury, the retroperitoneal hemorrhage, the bleeding into the back tissues, and also the rib injuries.
Okay. Your Honor, I am going to ask. At this time, I'm going to, and I don't want to have to make several trips over here, but it's just easier to do it this way. At this time, I'm going to tender States 33 and ask Dr. Clark to step down to explain what is shown in that photograph.
1 second.
And right, and I assume the court has something to say.
We had a discussion about this outside of your presence. I have a rule that the doctor can testify about that, and it will be displayed to you. So it will be admitted over the defendant's objection. But I do want you to understand that these the 4 pictures that I believe he will be testifying about depict are autopsy photos taken after the incision. So the 4 photos will depict the body after the incisions of the medical examiner, not as the body appeared externally. And you should not allow the graphic nature of these photos to affect your ability to evaluate the evidence without emotion or prejudice against either party. They're graphic, and don't allow the emotions of that to affect your judgment in this case. Okay? And they are photos that were taken after the incisions. All right, with that, Mr. Lamb, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Clark, there's these with regard to each of these other photographs, but starting with one of the liver, is there anything that is shown in this photograph that you could actually see outside the body?
No, sir.
Okay. So it's necessary to show the extent of those injuries internally, is that?
It gives an idea what happened to it.
Okay. All right. If you could step down then, please, and we will. At this time, I'm going to display State's Exhibit 33 to the jury, Your Honor, and have Dr. Clark explain the details of what he has testified to with regard to this injuries.
Okay, so we have taken off the chest shield. Again, we take a saw and we cut down through the ribs here and take the shield off. And so what you're looking at here is, this is the stomach, intestinal tract, and here's the liver. You can actually see the gallbladder here. We've lifted the liver up to show all these lacerations of the right liver lobe here. And then this is that retroperitoneal space I was talking about. See how the blood kind of oozes underneath the tissue back there. So that's why it's bleeding back there. And the adrenal gland actually lies right here. And that also has been injured. It doesn't show the adrenal gland in this picture, but actually shows the adrenal gland has actually been injured here. And then if you look over here, you see this hemorrhage around the ribs here, where there's been some pericostal or peri-rib hemorrhage. I did not see any rib fractures per se, because the infant's ribs are real flexible. Think of bamboo, would just be real flexible, not really breaking that easy. But there were some kind of stress on here, probably from a blow or an impact, that caused this to hemorrhage around those ribs.
Now, this blood that is shown here in the center of this photograph, Is this blood separated from the intestines, from the intestinal, or the digestive tract in some way? I mean,
Yeah, it is not bleeding into the intestinal tract. This is the transverse colon that comes across here. Again, small intestine. And you can see there's some hemorrhage around the intestine, but it didn't go into the intestine. There's no injury to the intestinal tract here.
okay. So with this blood that's here, can it migrate over time into the intestinal tract?
No, sir. No, sir.
So in the body, it's not just a big empty area with a lot of blood that's sort of circulating everywhere, right? I mean, blood is contained within different cavities, within different vessels, veins, arteries, etc. within the body. Is that right?
Well, it's contained to all the blood vessels, the arteries, and the veins throughout the body. Yes, sir.
All right. So that injury to the liver, I think you said that the injury to the liver and the adrenal gland may have been the result of a single blow.
That's a possibility, yes, sir.
What about the injury to the ribs in that same area?
Probably in the same area, yes, sir. Could be associated with that. One major blow to this area here, or a couple of hard blows to the area.
Okay. And is there, in your opinion, is there anything that would occur during the normal administration of CPR, even the, I suppose, poor administration of CPR, that would cause that injury to the liver and the adrenal gland?
I've seen some bad CPR on dead individuals, both adults and children, where a parent or a bystander, they really don't know what they're doing. They're too low. They mash on the upper abdomen instead of mashing on the chest and causing injuries to the liver. But I've never seen the extent of a liver damage like that from bad CPR. Okay, and I told you that the right lobe was a mess. It was torn up, and there was no split between the right and left lobe, which is what I see commonly. Okay, and then the bleeding into the tissues tells me that the child, when it was injured, had bleeding into those tissues. Must have had blood pressure. It must have had blood pressure at that time. Now, why do you do CPR? Because the heart isn't beating and they don't have blood pressure. So usually that blood just pools in the abdomen. You'll see a little blood in the abdomen. And we did have that, but what concerned me was the retroperitoneal bleeding.
And I'm not going to show it again, but you demonstrated for the jury, you showed where the stomach was. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you examine the stomach?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you find any? What did you find when you examined the stomach?
It was a normal stomach, and it had, let me look at my notes here, about 15 cc's, a tablespoon worth of clear watery fluid, and there was some green mucus and what looked like food particulates or bits of food. I couldn't identify the food.
What would cause the stomach to be, other than not eating, not having food in the body, what would cause the stomach to be empty at the time that you, or essentially empty at the time that you were examining it?
Well, either it hadn't eaten for a while, or that's the only thing I could say, yes, sir.
What about nausea, vomiting?
Yeah, but vomiting could help clear out the stomach, but it doesn't clear it out completely.
Okay. So vomiting would clear the stomach, or
Yeah, it could, yeah,
largely clear the stomach?
sure.
Is vomiting or nausea, is that an injury that, I'm sorry, is that a symptom that is sometimes associated with head injuries?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why is that? Why is nausea or vomiting associated with head injuries?
Because it disrupts the central nervous system. You'll have a head injury, and your body goes into, self-preservation mode, and causes that to happen as part of clearing out your stomach so you won't aspirate it.
Did you see anything in this autopsy that reflected or showed an injury of any sort to the intestines, the bowels, the colon, or any other part of the digestive system during your examination?
No, sir. There was no other injuries except for that hemorrhage around the transverse colon.
If you were speculating, if someone was speculating as to whether or not that this child may have had a diaper with bloody stool in it, you know, that would have been from some time earlier, you know, whether the morning of the injuries or the night before, if someone was speculating that there might be blood in the fecal matter, would you expect to find anything in an autopsy that might let you know whether or not there would have been blood in the fecal matter?
Well, it depends on what kind of blood you have there. If you have what may appear to be bright red blood, then you're thinking something going on with the anus or the rectum down lower. If you're thinking something like a gastric ulcer or a duodenal ulcer where it's got time to go through the intestinal tract, it usually comes out very black and tarry looking. I mean, there's medications like Pepto-Bismol that can make your stool look black and tarry looking. There's red dyes and beets or candy that can make your blood look red. I'm not sure. I would have to test that material to see whether it is actually blood or not.
If there was blood in the stool, would you expect to see blood elsewhere in the GI tract?
If it's coming from the GI tract, yes, sir.
And in this case, did you?
No, sir.
There was no blood in
No,
the
sir.
GI tract? Okay. All right. There was another injury to the head. Well, there are multiple injuries to the head that we haven't really discussed at this point. So let's take those now. And I will ask you, Dr. Clark, to tell me which of these, I don't know if it's 36 or 32, which one of those shows which side of the head?
This is left side, and that's right side.
Okay, all right. So 36 is the right side of the head, and 32 is the left side of the head. And Your Honor, these are the post-incision photographs we discussed earlier, but I would tender 36 and 32 at this time.
All right, they are admitted over objection.
Okay. All right, Dr. Clark, if you could step down, please, and let's look at stage 36, which is the right side of the head. And before I turn this photograph around, I would like you to explain to the jury what they're going to be seeing and why it appears the way it does.
Okay, this is part of the head examination. We make an incision behind one ear, come to the top of the head, and go behind the other ear. We'll pull the scalp forward, and we'll pull the scalp back. And this is going to show you what we call the calvarium, the top and sides of the head here. There's the temporalis muscles here and here that kind of bulge out. We take those down too. In this picture, we haven't taken them down yet. And so that's basically what you're going to see is the right side of the head with the scalp pulled forward and the scalp pulled back.
Okay. And so State's Exhibit 36, then, I'm going to display it this time to the jury. Can you, when I turn this around, can you identify for them the injuries that are shown in this photograph?
Okay. So, again, this is the front part of the scalp here, and this is the forehead here. Here's the right temporalis muscle here, and you can see the scalp reflected here. You can see the right ear here. So remember those abrasions and all those bruises we saw? Well, it wound up being full thickness scalp contusions, and then injuring the galea, which is a thin membrane over the top of the skull, or on the skull, it holds the muscles in place and stuff like that. You see hemorrhage here, and it looks much larger than for what we really saw up here. So there's been some impacts here, there's been some bleeding over time into these tissues here. And this, again, this is This brown thing here, that's that temporalis muscle. You bite down, you feel it bulge, okay? So that hasn't been moved yet. And you see so the impacts here. Remember those bruises we saw on the right forehead? Right forehead? That's where those are coming in here too.
Now, the bleeding that you see here, does it reflect an acute or chronic injury?
It looks like an acute injury. They all look about the same time. Again, before I forget, the back side here, you can see this is what the scalp is supposed to look like when you peel it back. This yellow area here, that's what it's supposed to look like. You can see different areas of heavier hemorrhage, kind of diffuse hemorrhage. And this back of the scalp, you can see it's all purple and thickened and swollen back in here.
And what would cause that to be thick and swollen and purple?
It's bleeding. It's been a tremendous impact to the back of the head.
State's Exhibit 32, which has been tendered and admitted. As I turn it around, if you could tell the jury what they're seeing here with regard to that.
Okay, again, this is the front scalp being pulled forward. Here's the left ear, and then the back scalp being pulled this way. This is more normal looking here. So most of the hemorrhage is on the back right side. This left side is clear of any hemorrhage in the back side. And then remember those abrasions we saw on the left side here? We saw a fairly good size one here, a small one back here. This has caused the hemorrhage to the entire scalp, and it affected again, the galea and the subgaleal space in this left temporal area. You can see the muscle that's right here.
The blood that hemorrhage here, where's that blood coming from?
That's due to impacts, tearing of the scalp, soft tissues, or tearing of the tissues.
Okay, right. And then finally, there was an injury at the back of the head.
That's correct.
Is that right? And so, with respect to the injury at the back of the head, can you tell the jury what the nature of that injury was?
Again, it's a full thickness scalp hemorrhage. It's actually becoming a hematoma. Hemorrhage of tissues is a bruise, but when you start getting displacement of tissue, getting a goose egg, I think it's usually called, or a thickening, that's called a hematoma because it's actually displacing and dissecting the tissues out.
And this, of all of these injuries that we have, that you have described, which of these injuries is the most severe? Which was the one that would have caused the most concern?
The one to the back of the head.
And does the photograph that I'm going to tender as State's Exhibit 29, does that photograph depict, what does it depict in terms of the nature of the injury, and what's the significance of the photograph before I even display it?
So this is where the scalp has been reflected back, and we reflect it so that it actually shows the top of the neck here, and you can see this large bruise in the scalp itself, and a large hematoma, basically, of the galea on the back of the head.
And how would that injury correlate to or associate with the fracture of the occipital bone?
Okay, the occipital bone is the bone that's on the back of your head. It's got something of a triangular shape like this. And there's a fracture line that goes from the occipital bone to the foramen magnum. Okay, that's part of the impact to the back of the head. Now, where these fingers are, those are the lambdoidal sutures, where this occipital bone connects to the parietal bones. Again, the bone has various separate bones so that when the infant's going through the birthing canal, it can collapse the head a little bit to allow it to come out, and then it re-expands. And those are called sutures, where the spaces between the bones. Well, the occipital bone is fractured, and then these lambdoidal sutures are also fractures called diastatic fracture, where they've been separated a little bit by force and cause hemorrhage along with it.
Can you tell when you do an examination like this, can you tell the difference between a lambdoidal suture that has been separated due to fracture from a lambdoidal suture that is simply not completely ossified and closed up?
Right, yeah, they are ossified at this point in time. But the violence of the blow to the back of the head has actually made cause tearing and bleeding into the space, that potential space there.
Okay. And then does State's Exhibit 29 demonstrate the extent of the hematoma and the bleeding at the back of the head?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I'll tender State's 29.
It's submitted over the previously stated objection.
And then again, before we turn that one around, can you tell them what is sort of the top of it versus the bottom of it? So
Right,
just
yeah, the
kind of
top part is
compare.
going to show the back of the skull, where you can see actually the bulge. You look at the photograph, it's got a 3D effect. It's actually bulging from the scalp itself. I mean, the bone itself. The gate is got a hematoma, and then a large bruise on the back of the skull.
Okay. So, State's Exhibit 29.
So again, this is the back of the head here, right side, left side, top. We have taken the scalp and we pulled down just a little bit further, and you can see the extensiveness of the hemorrhage back here. Again, kind of bulging out, giving that hematoma look, and then this full thickness hemorrhage here on the back side. So you can see it starts on the back side and actually kind of comes over to the right. So that hemorrhage we saw here earlier is, I believe, part of this here.
All right. Okay. What would cause an injury of the extent that you have identified to the back of the head? What would cause that?
A violent impact to the back of the head.
If someone incurs an injury that, to the extent that's manifested in the photographs that have been displayed to the jury, if someone incurs an injury to that extent, when would you expect there to be an onset of symptoms, and what symptoms would you expect there to be?
I would expect the symptoms will be coming in seconds to at most minutes. The child would get that kind of deer in the headlight look. Maybe may not complain of nausea because they don't usually know what that means, but start to vomit, stagger around, maybe even start to have a little bit of seizure activity, not kind of maybe drooling excessively, not protecting their airway at that point in time. They're not going to be eating or drinking. They're not going to be able to be social. They're not going to be able to move around on their own in terms of standing up and walking, all that good stuff.
So when you say you would expect those injuries or those symptoms to be manifested maybe as soon as seconds, but certainly within minutes of the impact, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. What's the longest time period that you would expect to see between the injury and the full onset of the symptoms?
These impacts,
typically.
yeah, these injuries can be in a variety of ranges. So to me, with this impact, even that just single impact to the back of the head, this is one in seconds that this child's going to be having symptoms. The fact that we have brain injuries and hemorrhage into the brain itself and around the brain shows me how violent this impact was, so that to my mind, it's going to be seconds. You can have a lighter impact that could cause similar symptoms, and it could be up to an hour, but in this case, I think it's seconds.
Would these injuries, is there any way for injuries to sort of accumulate over time and then ultimately result in what happened to this child? I mean, is this any possibility this reflects cumulative injury?
I mean, I can't rule out some of the abrasions and bruises. Could he have fallen the day before, hit this side of the head, and this morning fell and hit this side of the head, and caused various other impacts. They're more than I would expect from a simple fall, from a standing fall for an infant like that, but not the one to the back of the head. That's something that would result in symptoms very quickly, in seconds.
So could it be the injury to the back of the head? Just that single injury? Could it be that there's a, some impact that causes a little injury to the head, and then later another impact that causes a little injury of head, and it builds up to this? Or is this an all at once kind of injury?
The back of the head one's an all-at-once type of injury.
Is there, do you have an opinion as to whether this injury to the back of the head could have occurred due to a child falling off of a bed sometime hours before and sustaining this injury, but it not being manifested until the next day?
I find that very unlikely.
Even if the injuries were going to be manifested immediately, is this the type of injury that you might associate with a fall from a bed?
Not normally, no, sir, unless there's special circumstances.
Are they the type of injuries that you would associate with a fall from 40 inches onto a hard surface?
No, sir.
Are they the type of injuries that you would associate with a fall from a chair where a child fell forward and hit the front of his head on the floor?
No, sir.
Are they the type of injuries that you might associate with a child rolling off of an air mattress that sits 8 or 10 inches off of the floor?
No, sir.
What is the distinction? What is the distinction between, find the word I had written down, between applied force or inflicted trauma and accidental trauma? What's the difference between those?
Well, in accidental trauma, generally when children hit their head, they fall off a changing station or fall off a bed, they'll get a bruise, maybe a little bump. Generally not associated with any skull fractures or any significant brain injury at all. They cry, of course, mom or dad are worried. There are times when a child may fall and get on a hard cement surface, let's say, maybe fall off the monkey bars or something like that, and could hit their head and get a skull fracture. But generally, it is a linear skull fracture that really doesn't cause any injury to the brain itself. That the head absorbs the forces, and it doesn't translate to the brain itself. When I see something like this to me appears to be inflicted, meaning the kid is either hit with something on the back of the head or picked up, small enough to be picked up and slammed against something, a hard surface, a chair, a top of a table, or something like that.
The occipital fracture, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, sir.
The occipital fracture, is there anything unique about that bone which makes it harder to be fractured compared to other parts of the skull, for instance?
It's a little bit thicker bone than the temporalis bones here, but the location of the fracture is unusual in terms of something from an accidental fall. I've never seen one like that. A lot of times it's more from inflicted trauma.
If this part of the skull, the occipital area of the skull, does someone's shoulders or the crown of the head anatomically from here down, does that provide any level of protection or minimize the risk of that particular bone being fractured?
Yeah, when you're talking about a fall from standing height or from a height and landing on your back like that, generally the forces are displaced over the head and the shoulders, so you don't get the direct impact to the back of the head.
So is it your opinion that there would be, I'll rephrase it altogether. I stumbled my way through that one. Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the force that caused the fracture of the occipital bone was a force that was focalized as opposed to broad across the back of the back of the body and as a whole?
Yes, sir, I agree with that.
That's it.
All right. Cross-examination.
Yes, yeah. Hey, please, court. Good evening, Dr. Clark. I'm T. Gamble. I represent Trinity Poague.
Yes,
How are
sir.
you? And of course, I have some questions for you, and some general, then maybe more specific. But you've testified to a large extent about your autopsy, and of course, in your autopsy, your duty and your purpose is trying to determine injuries. What's the diagnosis and cause of injuries that occurred to the body that you're looking at? Correct.
Correct.
And at the same time, it's not really your focus or your job to try to determine who did it, but just simply what happened, correct?
That's correct.
And of course, in an autopsy, you can't state what location the crime occurred unless somebody told you or something. The body doesn't tell you that, right?
That's correct.
And the body doesn't tell you who did it either. You may get information from someone else that doesn't tell you that either, does it?
That's correct.
And in this particular case, you got a child that was deceased, and you were asked to do this autopsy, correct?
That's correct.
And just in visualizing, looking at the child, you could see some bruising and whatnot of, not extreme bruising, but around the head in places, some noticeable places on the child, correct?
That's correct.
But from the neck down in the abdomen area, you couldn't really see anything that was of note in that particular part of the body, correct?
That's correct.
And the same would hold true for the extremities of the arms and the legs. There was no bruising or anything on those areas, correct?
That's correct.
And I assume when you do autopsies, you've done them on small children in the past, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to assume again, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but some of those times it was because there was some type of abuse being alleged, correct?
That's correct.
And are there times when you see lots of bruising and things on the arms and legs where it seems that someone, the abuser, has been gripping or pulling on the child or things of that nature?
Yes, sir.
But you didn't see any of that on this particular case?
No, I did not.
At the same time, you have described certain injuries that you thought that you did observe, and some of those, I believe, are around the cheek area, correct?
That's correct.
Now, those were sort of slight to moderate bruising or discoloration, correct?
They were just slight.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So slight. It's
Yeah.
not something that in itself, by itself, would have alarmed you to any great degree, correct?
I come from a different perspective. As a forensic pathologist, I have to be suspicious or high alert anytime a child comes in. So they were minor, but as the case went on, it turned out to be something more going on.
Poor question by me, really, when I think about it. I mean, obviously, you're looking at anything you see, and you're first looking at as if this may lead to something more, correct?
That's correct.
And so if you see a small injury, even though in itself it's small, you still investigate further to see if it leads somewhere else or comes to some conclusion that maybe it is something more,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
But those particular marks on the cheek, is it possible that someone could have grabbed the cheeks of that child trying to see if it was okay, wake it up, doing like this, and leave marks similar to that on that child's face?
That's a possibility.
And so if Miss Poague had testified, had stated to the authorities or anyone that that is what she did when she saw the child become unresponsive, it would make sense that possibly that's where those marks came from, correct?
That's a possibility.
Now, of course, there are other marks that maybe wouldn't be explained for that. Obviously, the injury to the back of the head is not something you can just explain by twisting your cheeks, correct?
That's correct.
And that was a significant injury, as you've testified to,
Yes, sir.
correct? And you said that it took a great deal of force, correct?
That's correct.
Now, at the same time that you know it took a great deal of force, you don't know exactly what it was that caused that force, do you?
No, I did not.
I mean, you kind of know some things it probably was not. No one told you it was a car wreck, so you're pretty sure it wasn't caused by that, correct?
That's correct.
But if no one had told you what had happened to the child at all, you could have drawn that, you might have put that in the equation at least, correct?
Right. I felt comfortable ruling out the potential for an accidental trauma that is more likely more abusive or inflicted trauma.
And
But that's
was
as
that-
far as I could go with it.
And was that based upon because you felt it was, as you have described, a violent nature? To call it, it was a violent nature of the injury that caused, that's
Yeah.
why you believe that?
It was a focal impact and also the other impacts and other injuries that were sustained.
And again, even if you believe that, you wouldn't know who did that, would you?
No, I would not.
And as you looked at it, sometimes if you believe there's been that type of focal injury or violent impact, you can look at the injury and draw a conclusion that some type of instrument was used to do that, correct?
That's a possibility.
In some places, it would be like you could say that looks like a baseball bat must have been used to do it, correct?
Yeah, certain ways, or look for certain patterns of injury, yes, sir.
Or obviously something more brutal like a hammer or whatnot, correct?
That's correct.
And I assume that when you looked at these injuries, you didn't see any pattern or anything that made you believe that any type of instrument was used, did you?
Not that I could see, no, sir.
And so that leaves you with, and you don't think it was caused by, again, something like a car wreck. But you said you discounted the accidental fall, and let me ask you a little bit about that. If it was a steep enough fall, high enough, could it have caused that kind of injury?
Sure.
And I mean, no one's saying that the child fell from Mount Everest, but if it had a long, tall, hard fall, it could have caused significant injuries, correct?
In certain circumstances, I could see where an injury like that could occur.
And even if it didn't cause all of those injuries, isn't it true that a fall from a height of 40 inches onto a hard concrete floor could cause some injuries to a child?
Sure.
And in fact, I assume that, well, let me ask you a little bit about, I assume in your training, you've had lots of study, you've read lots of studies and gone to seminars and stuff that talk about injuries to children and concerning head injuries, correct?
That's correct.
And would I be correct in stating that one of the leading causes of death in children accidentally under the age of 2 or 3 is falls?
Can be, yes, sir.
And in some of those falls, they can be actually from not all that high of a level, sometimes only 30, 40 inches, that type of thing, correct?
Right, but again, there's certain circumstances which would allow for that to happen.
I understand there's certain circumstances, but it is potentially possible at times, correct?
Yes, sir, possible.
And the type of injuries that a child suffers in that type of situation many times will be a head injury that leads to their death, correct?
It can be, yes, sir.
And sometime when they have that type of death, it will be a fall that no one recognizes the severity of right then, and maybe in 12 hours or a half a day or a day, the child unexpectedly dies in some cases, correct?
In some cases, yes, sir.
And that's because of that injury is not significant enough looking from the outside, you can't always see it, but internally there's a real injury, correct?
Could be, yes, sir.
And in this case, the injury on the back of the neck, or head, I should say, you couldn't really see it as much as you felt it, correct? Initially.
On the external? Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
externally. I
Yeah.
understand you did some things that told you a lot more later, but the external part, you just looking back there, you felt it and said, oh, there's a problem, correct?
That's correct.
But if you had just been looking at that child and not know it was injured, you might not could tell from your eyesight that there was anything that happened to the back of his head, correct?
No, yes, sir.
And you've given some timelines on when you believe that this occurred, but you can't be definitive about how long a period of time it took from the injury until onset of death, can you?
No, sir. Seconds to minutes.
And you can't really say about some of these injuries that they all did not, you said, well, let me take that back. There's several injuries on the child, correct?
That's correct.
And so it's possible that some injuries occurred to the child previous to the one that led to the child's death, correct?
That's a possibility, yes, sir.
And in abuse, if you were, I assume you've autopsied lots of abuse cases, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in many of those abuse cases, there's a situation where the child has had injuries, old injuries, several of those before it finally leads up to a real bad injury.
Yes, some of those cases have that, yes, sir.
You've seen that in the past, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so it is possible, is it not, that some of those injuries happened a day before, half a day before, or even a couple of days before the one that led to the death of the child, correct?
That's correct.
And you wouldn't have any idea who or what caused that, would you?
No, sir.
And some of the marks that you had on the child, other than the ones on the cheek, the one that's, I think there's a mark over the eye and a couple of other little bruises, those type injuries could occur to a child simply by rough playing, doing what kids do sometimes, bumping into things and all that stuff, correct?
That's a possibility.
I mean, that's not an earmark on any of those. It just said, oh, that's caused by a particular thing. It's just an injury that draws your attention, correct?
That's correct.
But the two that drew you most attention, of course, were the liver and the skull injury, correct?
Correct.
Now, on the skull injury, I know you talked a little bit about sutures a little bit ago, correct?
That's correct.
And I've asked some other people about it, didn't know as much about sutures as I think maybe you will, but am I right, there's like 5 different areas of sutures on the skull?
Yes, sir.
And those sutures are, as you've described, they're sort of malleable when the child is young, able to stretch, and especially in the birth canal, but even after for a while before they solidify and make a solid structure, correct?
Correct.
And some of those sutures take a little longer than others to be fully developed, correct?
That's correct.
And is there one of those sections of sutures that normally take as long as 5 years to fully develop?
Well, all the sutures are developed, and they're connected with a fibrous membrane, but they always have a little bit of give to them. Yeah.
Do they even remain to give when you become an adult?
Oh, no, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
That's where I'm getting at.
Oh, okay, okay. I thought we were still talking about infants.
I'm not asking it right, and I'm not a doctor, so I may be butchering that a little bit, but it's got some give in it to begin with as they're young.
Right.
And it begins to get more and more solidified to eventually there's no stretching to it, it's solid.
Correct.
But a child of a year and a half does have some portions of the skull that still have that malleability to it.
That's correct.
And I believe that at least one of those areas in the back of the head take a little longer to develop than some of the areas as far as becoming rigid. Am I correct on that?
I'm not sure about that. I can't answer that question.
You just know there's some time period before they get solid.
That's correct.
And so if you have the situation in which that skull is still somewhat malleable, has some play in it, which we know the kid was young enough to have some of that, doesn't that make it a little more likely that for injury to occur to the skull and to the brain of a child in that situation as compared to one that's already solidified?
This is a violent impact that has actually caused a bone fracture.
Mm-hmm.
So if the kid had, let's say, several years older, had been more solidified, I would expect that there probably would not have been lambdoidal stretching and fracturing, but there may have been a much more severe skull fracture because that plate actually is going to give a little bit to absorb, almost like a shock absorber, to absorb that impact, but still wound up with a fracture line.
Well,
So I don't think it puts that at any higher risk.
Well, isn't it true that young children under the age of 3 have a higher risk of death from skull fractures, injury, than people older than that?
I'm not sure I know that answer to that.
If you don't know, that's fine.
Yeah,
If
I
you
don't
tell me
know.
you do not know.
I don't know.
Okay. Now, you were asked some questions about if the child had a blood in its diaper from a previous diaper before this injury that led to its death. So you remember being asked some questions about that, correct?
That's correct. Mhm.
Now, if you did have blood in the fecal matter, at times, couldn't that be an indication that an injury has occurred to the person that caused blood to be in the area and then be in the fecal matter?
In this case, no, because I did not see any blood in the rectum, stomach, small bowel. But in your case, in a general case, yes, it's possible.
So generally, it could show, so somebody got injured earlier, that would be possible to cause fecal matter to have blood in it, correct?
That's correct.
And I've asked this to some other people that testify, but there is a test to be able to determine whether or not there's blood in fecal matter. is
That's
there not?
correct. Mhm.
Pretty easy test. It's not some complicated test. It's rarely done. It's done on a frequent basis.
That's correct.
And it's just something you send to a lab and they can come back and tell you whether or not it's blood in the fecal or not,
Yeah,
right?
they have home tests too. It's called a hemocult. You put the feces on a piece of filter paper, put a chemical on it, and it'll change color to show there's blood in there.
So we could do that if we had a sample to test, correct?
That's correct.
Now, what about human vomit? Would we be able to test it to determine whether or not it came from a human being? If not, you can tell me
Vomit,
that.
I don't know. I never thought about that. I don't think I could answer that question.
Okay.
Unless you're going to do DNA and find human DNA in the vomit, I guess.
Probably could from the saliva mixed in with it,
Oh,
correct?
yeah. Mhm.
Now, you said when you tested that the stomach was close to empty, correct?
That's correct.
And if the stomach had been, I don't know, half full, more or less full, and the person been vomiting, you'd still expect to find some residual amount of stuff in the stomach, correct?
And the 15 cc's could be the residual amount.
Now, in your study, in your keeping your credentials as a pathologist and forensic science, do you go to certain continuing education courses?
Yes, sir.
Required to do so?
Yes, sir.
You keep that up to date, I assume, is that
Yes, sir.
correct? In addition, do you read journals, which I would call treatises and that type of things that talk about medical conditions in your particular field?
Yes, sir.
Have you had any familiarity at all with a lady named Mary E. Case?
Yes.
You know who she is?
Yes, sir.
St. Louis medical forensic examiner, correct?
Correct.
And would I be fair to state that she's fairly well known in the forensic science pathology field?
That's correct.
And do you have respect for her work?
Yes, sir.
Aware of her work?
Yes, sir.
And being aware of her work, are you aware of the publication called Brain Pathology?
Yes, sir.
Do you read it from time to time to get information from it?
I have taken at least 2 seminars with her.
With Ms. Case?
Dr. Case, yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Case, I shouldn't call it that, you're right. And she's had a pretty distinguished career, has she not?
Yes, sir.
And so if she has some opinions about accidental traumatic head injury in infants and young children, you would at least give it some credit, I guess you'd say.
Sure.
You might still have your own opinion, of course, right?
That's correct.
But you would listen to it. Well, she published an article in Brain Pathology in the year 2008, and before I go any further, Your Honor, let me hand this to... And she says in one portion of the treatise that she's published that about 1 to 3% of shortfalls in young children cause a skull fracture.
Correct.
Yes?
Never mind. Go ahead.
Now it says further that approximately less than 1% cause an epidural hemorrhage, but even more rarely a subdural hemorrhage, and if these hemorrhages enlarge sufficiently to become a mass lesion, death may result from increased intracranial pressure.
Correct.
Would you agree with that?
Part you're reading from?
I'm sorry, that's on the third, let me see, 1, 2, 3, the 4th page. Now with that, she was just citing some general propositions about injuries with falls, but then says a divergent view is presented in a paper by Dr. Amaya, proposing that in fact contact injury may distribute injury widely throughout the brain of a young child. And then she goes into some particular research. But what interests me most about it, if you finally go to a table that she included, it's about 4 or 5 pages long. You see, it looks like this.
Okay.
She talks about how, just in a general sense, sometimes injuries to children can occur that are surprising in nature of what occurs in the result. But she describes a 21-month-old male who fell out of bed. Says he cried after the fall. He was able to be comforted. He vomited, but then put back to bed, and he was found dead in the bed the next morning. And the findings were that the left temporal subjugal hemorrhage, a left temporal lineal fracture, a large epidural hemorrhage over the left lateral temporal convexity was what occurred.
Okay.
Now, would you agree with me that that's probably not the typical thing that would happen from someone falling out of bed?
And I would like to know what surface he fell on to know how he got a fracture, but he's also fracturing the thinnest bone in the skull, the temporal bone.
But nevertheless, if you knew that information, the harder the surface would make it more likely, I guess, correct?
Well, yeah, also the fact that there's a bulge of some sort, let's say that's some kind of, I don't know, something hard on the floor that's around it that could cause the impact to be more focal?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay. Well, she also talks about a 4-month-old male who fell out of an adult bed and struck the edge of a bedside table.
Okay.
And in that one, he was taken to the hospital, had a CT scan, was read as normal, would not eat or sleep well, survived for 2 days, taken to a pediatrician, and died on the way to the office. Had a right forehead contusion, fracture of the right frontal bone and right orbital plate, epidural hemorrhage over the right anterior cranial fossa. Does that sound like something that could occur? Not saying in your case, but just in general?
Yes, in general, yes, sir. Special circumstances I was telling you about.
And she then talks about a 7-year-old female who fell off a tree stump about 3 feet high, that'd be 36 inches, and hit the back of the head. Complained of a headache, vomited several times over the next 12 hours, and was found dead the next morning. Had a right frontal subgaleal hemorrhage, a fracture of the right frontal bone extending to the coronal suture posteriorly, an epidural hemorrhage over the left frontal, small contusions of left superior and middle temporal gyri. Now,
I'm going to object to any continued portion of counsel reading this article into the record. Basically, I mean, first of all, I objected it's hearsay. The use of a journal article is properly allowed sometimes for the purpose of impeaching a witness. You know, you can impeach a witness with facts from a learned treatise, but to simply read it and say, well, don't you agree that that in this case that this child somewhere in St. Louis had this injury and died? I mean, he's literally, when I thought the first example or two, I thought it was being used for impeachment. Now I see that he's simply being read into the record, and so I object to it as being hearsay.
Mr. Gamble, what's your response?
my response is, that actually Georgia law requires exactly what I'm doing in order to question an expert about a treatise, and that is, first, you must establish that the expert that is on the stand is familiar with the person or the literature that's being published to such an extent that they believe that it's verifiable and reliable, and that if you can do so where they believe that it has some bearing on their profession and the expert opinion that's being offered is reliable to them, that you ask them and question them about that, and if they acknowledge that, which of course the doctor has done in stating he's even been to a couple of seminars with Ms. Case. But then in addition to that, once that's been established, you have a right to question them for particular excerpts from the literature, and you're not allowed to introduce the treatise or the document that you're talking about into evidence to go out with a jury, but just a
You're
question.
letting him see case examples, and then you're asking him what is the question about the case examples, if those sound reasonable or what?
No. I mean, I'm telling you, the expert may disclose. You first have to say.
No, I'm talking about the questions you asked him about. I guess maybe let's take a pause, let him read what it is you're going to ask him about, and then you can ask him the questions about it.
I can do that. That's not the way it read for me as far as saying how it should be done.
Well, I've seen it where you show it to the expert and he reads it.
that, yeah.
All right. I'm gonna let's take a 10-minute recess, or maybe 15 minutes, and then we'll reconvene.
Someone, I mean, you can use a journal article, a treatise, whatever, for the purpose of impeaching a witness. But you say, your opinion is this, yes or no, yes, that's my opinion. And this treatise says that opinion is wrong in some way. I mean, and in other words, it's some contradictory information or whatever that is, that's used to try to establish that the expert has, made some error of judgment, that he's made some error in his assumptions or something of that nature. Simply saying, do you agree that this child in St. Louis had this kind of a fracture? Yep, apparently he did. I mean, that's not impeaching of his testimony in any way. It doesn't disprove the truth of anything the doctor's testified to, which is what impeachment is to try to disprove the truth of his testimony.
What's your response to the objection, Mr. Campbell? I mean, I understand how you can use a treatise to cross-examine a witness about his opinion,
Yes.
but you're using more of like case examples, other cases. So what?
I think that I'm allowed to bring that forth to him by statute and by case law, that I'm allowed to ask him questions once he's established that he believes that's a reliable source. And in this case, to establish that although he has said that it's unlikely that certain things could have occurred, certain injuries could have occurred from a fall or this, that, or the other, that this particular study shows some examples.
So the
in fact,
impeachment
that did occur.
is that an injury from a fall a head injury from a fall can cause a...
Significant injury to a small child.
Okay.
Significant enough to cause death. These are examples where it did.
Okay.
That is why.
Well, I want you to share this literature with him. We'll take about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and
Yes.
I'll let you reconvene your examination, but I don't want it to be just you reading something to him and then, I mean, he should be able to look at it. All right. So do you have an extra copy of that?
Yes, I'm actually just marking it where you can find it. Yeah.
Okay. We'll come back in, I'll come back at 4:10. That's 13 minutes.
Not far before we took a break, I was asking some questions about this particular brain pathology article by Dr. Mary E. Case called Accidental Traumatic Head Injury in Infants and Young Children. And you now have a copy of that article, do you not?
That's it, I do.
And I had pointed you, when I handed to you, a particular page that I had marked through with highlights on it, correct?
Right.
And if you could, and I think you already are, turn to that page.
Yes, sir.
And that page is page 6 of 12 on the document. And I believe I've already asked you questions, or at least read you and then asked you what you thought about the death of the 4-month-old male that fell off the adult bed and the 7-year-old female who fell off of a tree stump, correct?
Yes, sir.
And, well, maybe let me ask you this. I'm not sure. I may have, reading that on that page. What is this? It's a table, it appears to be, that says case number, case history, age, sex, how accident occurred, and findings, correct?
Correct.
And these are examples that Dr. Case has put in her article to show when someone died accidentally from a fall in a manner that it was kind of be surprising that the injury was that severe given the nature of the fall and the height of the fall, correct?
Correct.
And admittedly, she says within the article this is not the norm, correct?
Correct.
But it does happen sometime, right?
Yes, sir, specifically to epidural hemorrhages.
Okay. Well, let's get to that in a moment, but on item number 1, what does it say happened there? I didn't read that one to you, I don't think, did I? Tell me if I did. I may be wrong.
It's already been read into the record.
Okay, if that's been read into the record, then skip down to number 3. I don't believe I read that one to you, did I?
Cried after, you want me to read it?
Yes, just tell me what it says about that particular little case study,
Cried
number
after
3.
fall, able to be comforted, vomited, then put back to bed, found dead in bed in the morning.
How old was the child?
21 months,
And was a male or female?
male.
And says it fell out of bed.
That's correct.
And then what was the injury?
Left temporal subgaleal hemorrhage, left temporal linear fracture, large epidural hemorrhage over left lateral temporal parietal convexity.
And that led to the death of that child being found dead in the bed the next morning, correct?
Yes, sir, and that was an epidural hemorrhage.
Okay. Number 4, what does it say about that one?
Found on ground with no return bite, combative, became somnolent in the emergency room. CT scan showed fracture of right temporal, became,
It stops there, doesn't
it
it?
stops there, yeah.
How old was the
10
child?
years, male, riding bike and fell off, not wearing a helmet. Right temporal scalp contusion, fracture of right temporal skull, epidural hemorrhage over right parietal area. Or it's spelled parietal wrong.
So I understand that it shows some times when someone fell from small areas and it caused their death, but was in an area of the skull different than this one, correct?
Correct.
But nevertheless, it does give examples of that happening, correct?
In cases of epidural hemorrhages, yes, sir.
I believe it's all the questions I have for right now, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gamble. Mr. Lamb, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Case, on page 9 of her article, the last sentence of the first paragraph, the first partial paragraph there, the last sentence of that paragraph says what, Doctor?
The most common cause of subdural hemorrhage in the younger age group is abusive head injury.
The most common cause of subdural hemorrhage is abusive head injury.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. And epidural hemorrhages are hemorrhages that occur where in relation, if you have the skull, you have what's the layer immediately above, like you said there's a thin fibrous layer of the skull. What is that?
That's called the galea.
The galea, okay? And then above the galea, what's the next level?
Well, that's going to be where your scalp comes in.
Okay? And that's where the scalp is. And what are the layers of the scalp?
Okay, the scalp has skin, and then it's got subcutaneous fat, and it's got fibrous tissue, which adheres to the galea. And the galea adheres to the calvarium, or the bone. Beneath the bone is the dura mater. Okay, it's a fibrous line inside the calvarium. An epidural hemorrhage is between the dura and the bone. These are together. Again, remember the retroperitoneal space I talked about? You got to have pressure to push through there. An epidural hematoma causes those to separate. The reason why an epidural hemorrhage has a delayed death is because it takes longer for it to form a mass that causes injury to the brain. And epidural hemorrhages are associated with skull fractures, which we have in this case, but my epidural hemorrhages are tiny. I also have diffuse subdural hemorrhages on the brain, which is associated with inertial trauma to the brain. This is where you got your skull, you got your dura mater, and then you got a potential space called subdural space, and then the brain. Well, the brain has been impacted and injured, causing it to kind of slosh back and forth, causing tearing of the subdural bridging veins, which causes a subdural. This is different from an epidural hemorrhage. All these cases that are cited on this document are associated with death due to an epidural hemorrhage. This infant has epidural, small, large subdural, and subarachnoid hemorrhages, which is also an indicator of brain trauma.
In addition, where there are skull fractures associated with the injuries that are referenced in Dr. Case's article, the fractures are what kind of fractures typically that are associated with that?
Well, I think they said linear.
Right, like they're referred to it in several places as simple linear fractures. Is that right?
Correct.
And in fact, at the very beginning of the article on the first page, it says that in 2 to 3% of falls, a simple linear skull fracture, and the majority of these are uneventful in neurological deficit or something is blocked out here. In about 1% of the fractures, epidural or subdural hemorrhage occurs. Okay, now that's from simple linear fractures, is that correct?
That's correct.
What kind of a fracture was involved in this case?
Well, it was a linear irregular fracture, but it wasn't a common unit. It wasn't broken into pieces. So it is a linear fracture, but it's through the occipital bone and extends down to the foramen magnum.
Okay. It's a longer. It was a. I think you identified it as a full thickness fracture that extended along a pretty far along the through that bone. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And with that type of a fracture and the associated trauma to the brain itself, which you've just described, from forces, but basically the brain being slammed against the inside of the skull. Is that a way of simplifying that?
Exactly.
Okay. And so when you have those things combined, would you expect there to be, quote, a delayed reaction or delayed complications resulting in death, hours or days later?
Not in this situation, no sir, not in this case. I've had epidural, I was an emergency room doctor for a while, and I had epidural hemorrhage on a kid who fell off a wall. He was perfectly fine for about 2 hours. We did a CT scan, saw that he did have an epidural, and he went right to neurosurgery. So the epidural hemorrhages are salvageable in a lot of the cases, but you gotta be high index of suspicion that they're there.
There was one of the sections I had marked in here, and now I can't find where I marked. I think somewhere there was a reference to falls of less than 6 feet are typically not associated with significant brain injury. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
And of course, 40 inches is substantially less than 6 feet, right?
Correct.
And do any of these injuries that are referenced in Dr. Case's article, do any of these injuries involve a fracture of the occipital bone?
Not that I saw.
Okay. And what is the difference? What is the distinguishing factor? I mean, other than location and shape, what is the distinguishing feature of the occipital bone as compared to like the right frontal bone, the right orbital plate?
Well, the temporal parietal bones tend to be a little bit thinner, a little bit thinner. The frontal bone and the occipital bone are both a little bit on the thicker side.
And because the occipital bone is thicker, typically, would that require more force to cause a fracture to that bone?
More focal force to that area.
More focalized and more forceful?
Yes.
Okay. So more focalized and more forceful injury would be required. Okay. In the case before you, not the one in St. Louis, in the case before you, do you have an opinion as to why this child died?
I felt it was due to abusive head trauma.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not there was any significant time difference or time gap between the infliction of the trauma and the onset of symptoms and ultimately death?
And again, in my opinion, seconds to minutes after the trauma was occurred.
Thank you.
All right. Recross.
Dr. Clark, did you know the reference was made in the treatise I was reading you from Dr. Case, in which there was a reference to Dr. Maya? Are you familiar with Dr. Maya at all?
Yes, sir, I've known about over the years. The problem is that you did not finish that. You said a divergent view is presented in a paper by Dr. Amaya et al., proposing in fact that contact injury may distribute injury widely throughout the brain of a young child. However, this is not the view supported by the literature noted earlier that looked at hundreds of cases of shortfalls and found that the great majority produced no loss of consciousness nor neurological deficit.
Yes, it did say that, but then it gave examples when that was not the case, correct?
And the cases that you presented to me are epidural hemorrhages, and that's not what we have here. We're comparing apples and oranges.
That's all the questions I have, John.
All right. May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
You can be excused. We appreciate it.